So let me explain how the name India came about and how the name Bharat came about, but they actually come from the same origin. So you need to understand what the origin is. Now the name Bharat actually has two origin stories. There is an older origin story which is a Vedic origin story and a later one which is a Puranic one. But the link between the names Bharat and India actually go back to the Vedic story, the original Bronze Age story. So let me tell you that story, that you will immediately understand how this works. So back in the early Bronze Age, the Vedic age, we are told in the Rig Veda that there was a tribe called the Bharatas, or also called the Trutsus, who lived in roughly what is now Haryana. And they used to call their homeland Sapta Sindhu, or the land of the seven rivers. Now what happens is that the Bharatas are attacked from the west by a coalition of 10 tribes. And there is a great battle on the banks of the river Ravi, or then called Parushti, in which the Bharatas completely decimate the 10 tribes. Then what happens is that they turn eastward and they defeat another chieftain called Bheda on the banks of the Yamuna. So what happens is that the Bharatas, start out from this original homeland called the Sapta Sindhu in Haryana, and they spread out and create India's first empire. And their chieftain, whose name is Sudas, then conducts the first Ashwamedha Yagya and becomes a Chakravartin, whose symbol is the wheel. So we have the Mauryan wheel in our flag, but the origin of the idea of it being the symbol of power actually goes back to King Sudas of the Bharata tribe. Now, note here that there is two words. One is Bharata and there is Sapta Sindhu. The Sapta Sindhu is the name of their homeland and Bharata is the name of the tribe. Now, note here next what happens. What happens is that the Bharatas, they do something quite unique. You see, typically a tribe would just impose their gods on whoever were the defeated gods. Instead, the Bharatas call all the defeated tribes and even the tribes that were surrounding them, they hadn't defeated them but they were in contact with them, and they basically put together all the knowledge they have, which we now know as the compilation of the Vedas, the first three Vedas. And in the very last chant of the Rig Veda, there is something like a contract between all these tribes where they say that, look, we will give all the tribes and their gods a place around the sacrificial fire. So in the very last chant of the Rig Veda, all the tribes that they knew about, all their gods were given a place around the sacrificial fire. So it's sort of like a contract, and in some ways this is the idea of pluralism that triggers Indian civilization. It is an idea of assimilation as opposed to imposition. Now what happens is this idea begins to spread. So over a period of time, this idea, more and more gods have given place around the sacrificial fire, and more people begin to accept the identity of being Bharatiya. And so by the Iron Age, the whole landscape of the Indian subcontinent has come to call itself Bharatiya, and the land of the seven rivers idea, the Sapta Sindhu, then comes to cover the whole idea. So you end up with this chant, which is very commonly used even today during when you do ritual baths and so on, which goes somewhat like this: Gange cha Yamunu chaiva Godavari Saraswati Narmade Sindhu Kaveri Jalasmin Kuru. So what does it do? The seven rivers, which were originally just the tributaries of the Sindhu, of the Saraswati, it didn't include, by the way, the Sindhu river. The Sapta Sindhu includes only the tributaries of the Saraswati originally. They came to take over all these rivers across India, which went all the way down to Kaveri. So now all of India becomes Sapta Sindhu. Okay, so this is the origins of the name Bharata as per the Rigvedic tradition.
Okay.
Now what happens is other countries also call India Sapta Sindhu. Now in the Avesta, which is the Persian texts, what happens is there is a phonetic shift. Devdutt also mentioned a phonetic shift among the Arabs. Actually, it's amongst the Persians, the ancient Avestan Persians. And the sound of Sa becomes Ha. So Saraswati becomes Harahati. By the way, the same thing happens in modern Assamese as well, as it happens to be. And so Sapta Sindhu becomes Hapta Hindu. Now, I am telling you this because this confusion, because the word Sindhu is used in isolation to mean the Sindhu River or the Indus River. That's not the case. The first known use of the word Hindu comes in the context of Hapta Hindu, i.e. Sapta Sindhu, which is the name which the Western Persians called India. And by the way, there seemed to have been some dispute between the Westerns and the Vedic Indians, because they tend to mention that, the Hapta Hindu region had had gone into bad times and bad things had happened there and so on. So there obviously some sort of a conflict going on there, which we can't tell what exactly it is.
Okay.
Anyway, this is the origin. Hapta Hindu is the origin of the word Hindu. Now, that is correct, that this word then goes further westward and then becomes India. So you go from Sapta Sindhu to Hapta Hindu to Hindu, and then that becomes India. That part of it is absolutely correct. This random extrapolation into the word Hindu, which is an Indian word, etc., which Devdutt did, there is no historical evidence of that. That is a separate issue altogether.
Okay.
But this part of the story that I said, which is the link between Bharata and Sapta Sindhu, is an old one and a very well established one in the text.